Okay, so the last section that we went over was the normal distribution, right? We went over what is the skewed distribution and what does that look like, right? And then before in the previous video, we looked at empirical rule. And then we just looked at an IQ bell curve that thought was interesting to know, right? So all these are normal except for the skewed statistics or the skewed bell curve. So what I wanted to talk about is just to categorize all this information, right? So when you're thinking about a normal bell curve, and we talked about how a normal bell curve means that it can be one side mirrors the other, right? So a normal bell curve is used to describe data in several ways. And before this video, I explained about descriptive, or I gave you an idea of what we're going to talk about, which is descriptive, right? Statistics, right? So descriptive statistics. So by definition, descriptive statistics describe data, right? So just imagine if you were doing your experiment, right? You have your IV, which you manipulate, and turns into your DV, right? DV is data. Also can look at it as outcome, right? Results, right? What is the data outcome results of this manipulation, right? And one of the ways that I can explain my data, the outcome, the results of the manipulation is using a normal bell curve. There are several ways to do that. So I want to talk about those. And we kind of already did talk about a couple of those already. So one of the ways we talked about this was looking at the shape of the bell curve. And I'll put BC for short, just to keep it light, right? So, of course, we said the normal bell curve shows how much the data is around the mean, right? But in a normal distribution, right, it mirrors the other side, right? It's asymmetrical, well, symmetrical. So, right, so we look at skewed. Skewed is when we talked about it could be negatively skewed or it can be positively skewed. And we're looking at the tail end. So keep that in mind. Which way is the tail pointing? The next thing that we look at when we take a look into how data is used on the bell curve. As a matter of fact, let me write this here. How data, and I'm going to erase this to get this out the way. Okay, so how data is used on a, and I'll put BC for bell curve, right? So we have one way that it's used is to explain if I have extreme scores or not, right? That's the skewed distribution. And you might see it as another term called outliner or outliners. Same thing, different name. The next way that we use the bell curve to describe data would be through the measures of central tendency. Okay, so measure of central tendency. So this is defined as where is the data centered, right? Is the data in the middle? So we know that the mode, the median, and the mean are all in the middle of the bell curve. And they all start with M's, right? So if they all start with M, you can think about it being in the middle of the bell curve. Let me get this V together. Ooh. All right, so this isn't a normal bell curve, right? You would have this mode, mean, and median in the middle of the bell curve, right? But if it's skewed, and then we go back to what we talked about before, then we have it pushed all the way over here. So I'll put 3M, not 3M tabs. So 3M and maybe have 3M over here, right? So there's something going on here, right? Because it shouldn't be here, right? It should be in the middle of that bell curve. So it's kind of spaced out. Okay, so we talked about the measure of central tendency. The next one that we are going to talk about would be everyone's favorite is the z-scores. Okay, so z-scores, they tell you as well with a normal bell curve how spread out the scores are from the mean. Right, so when we look at z-scores, they are similar to a normal standard deviation because they also use 0, right? They use +1 and -1. Right, so this helps, using a z-score helps compare individual scores to a population. I think about standardized testing, take the GRE, right, and you can get your score in comparison to other individual scores. So individual scores to a population. And we'll go more into these scores as we go along, but this is just so that you can see how we use the bell curve to explain data. The next thing we're going to talk about is percentile ranks, and we did that with the, you could say the empirical rule here, but not necessarily, so let's just break it down. Right? We can still use it, but percentile ranks is not empirical rule. Percentile ranks tells you how your scores compare to other based on percentages. So percentile ranks, right? Because order numbers mean something here. Percentiles describe high score compares to others. Right? So we talked about the Z-score, tells you how many standard deviations. So this tells you how many standard deviations. Right, we mentioned that a 0, plus and minus 1 on both sides. This gives you standard deviation. This gives you the percentage. Right, so maybe you're in the 50 percentile. Right. You can also think about the 50 percentile is the average, which is the mean. Right. So next we could say 84 percentile is higher than the 50. So it'll be above, like there'll be that one standard deviation, and so forth. And the last one that I want to talk about here is going to be, I have 6 twice. So, all right. So 7. The next one that we're going to talk about, let me fix these numbers, okay? Because these numbers, okay, so 4, 5. I feel like I missed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the next one we're going to talk about is the types of data, behavior on a bell curve. Right, so this is defined as showing you what is the data, what does it look like? You can get the low variability. You can also get high variability. And then you can also get an average variability. And we'll talk more about that. Right, so we have types of data, behavior on the bell curve, percentile, ranks, right? We have Z-scores. We have shape of the bell curve, measure of central tendency, and then I want to add the empirical rule, which will be the last one here. And we talked about that before, right? It breaks the bell curve down into percentages. And that also shows you how spread out the scores are around the mean. So we have the empirical rule. Empirical rule we said earlier, like it's 68, 95, right? And then we have 99.7. So in the next video, I want to be able to go through all of these. So let's check off what we talked about already. So we have checked this box off. And we looked at the empirical rule. So the next one that I would like to go over will be number 2, which will be measures of central tendency. So that is what we will talk about next. And let me know if you have any questions, leave a like or a comment or a follow, that would be awesome. But yeah, so I'm happy to do this, and I hope to see you in the next video.